my name is Dione Cavadias. This is a video presentation that I'm preparing for my BK fellowship application, but it's based on a presentation that I did for my Girls as Rebels class. This is all for Yonsei University. The topic at hand is hashtag girlhood, and it's an endeavor that I have to explore how girlhood and the definition or process of being a girl and becoming a woman is shifting now in the digital age. And I'm curious to see how the younger generation is defining girlhood through social media apps like TikTok. I think it's important to kind of recognize the influence and the effect that digital tools have on the movements of rhetoric, and how they're not only tools, but they're kind of integrated in the actual knowledge that's being produced. Like in the way that social media isn't just a distributor of knowledge and a distributor of ideas, but it's also the landscape where it's being produced. So I'm curious to see how, in this new age, how social media, like TikTok specifically, shifts the way the young woman is defining herself. The research conducted here was in 2022, so it is beginning to already be a little outdated. I hope to extend this research and to develop my thesis. And for that, I will have to do more contemporary research and pool content that's now live, I suppose. But I still think it's useful to look into to discuss what I found in 2022. But yes, okay, I think now I can begin. As I said earlier, I wanted to explore feminist discourse in the digital landscape, specifically TikTok, to see how young women and young girls are defining themselves today. Obviously, the audience and users on TikTok are very specific and only represent a small demographic of young girls/women, but considering the spread and activity of the platform, I felt it would be insightful to peer into the female narrative being built online. I do want to note preemptively that the hashtag girlhood has a comparatively small reach at the time, with only 7.6 million views, and the creators of which seem to be predominantly white. Now, that may just be because of my For You page and TikTok recognizing my demographic as a cis white woman. So in my research going forward, I want to try deceive TikTok into thinking I am another demographic and try to find potentially other content. Anyways, moving forward, girlhood is not only limited to childhood, but extends into being a teenager. Some TikToks noting turning 20 as the last year of girlhood, which I felt was an interesting thing to take note of, because a lot of canonical forms of literature denote girlhood ending at around 15, especially in Victorian or pre-Victorian literature, most likely because by that age girls would be married off, and I guess their marriage would push them into womanhood. But obviously in the digital age and in contemporary society, that has kind of changed. Anyways, moving forward. Let's see. For today's presentation, I wanted to focus on the post-feminist and third-wave feminist debates that we can interpret into and observe in today's TikTok content. Notably, the most prominent topic is a debate on femininity or feminism. Is it empowering, or is it simply perpetuating oppressive patriarchal archetypes? After second-wave feminism, which urged women to break away from the domestic trope and recognize the limitations of their feminine role, you suddenly had women in the 90s and early 2000s that were calling women to re-embrace their femininity in an effort to redefine, or rather realign, the value placed on conventionally female characteristics. Girl power or girly culture re-signifies the symbolism and imagery of femininity to revalue the female identity. Indulging in domesticity was no longer passive, but active, allowing women to commodify, capitalize, and invest in their girlhood, womanhood. Although extremely gendered, feminine interests such as shopping, makeup, baking, eating, self adorning, overconsumption, emotional consumption, excess, or frivolity allowed women to become enabled members of capitalism, turning their private sphere into a marketable public sphere. To an extent, women have their own capital control and aren't ashamed to indulge in traits their feminist mothers had shunned. To quote Jen's 2018, femininity is powerful and empowering, providing women girls with the agency to negotiate the possibilities of their gender role. And it's really impressive to see all of this being expressed in TikTok content. So whilst TikTok content might seem frivolous and just silly, you actually see theoretical feminist concepts distilled into daily conversation. I'll play some of these. Which just kind of give you the aesthetic ambience of femininity just from the sound and the visual. And for lack of time, I won't be reading each post, but maybe as I speak, you can take a chance to read them. But I have noted underneath what are the general themes and words being used in these kind of posts, and you see a lot of feminism, like femininity. You have a diction like gentle, kind, hands, wrists, clothes, perfume, flowers, citrus, mess, crushes, shopping, overspending, baking, stupid little or silly little, cute little, imagery of raspberries, moon, nature, universe, romanticism, and simplicity. Like all of these feminine activities and qualities that used to be shunned are suddenly romanticized again, and they have value. And you see girls and older girls or young women that are nostalgic or want to embrace and enhance these feminine qualities. And oftentimes this femininity almost has laced within it this sense of youthful freedom, which is sweet. Yeah. However, this perspective has received a lot of criticism in the academic world, but more importantly in the real world. There is a deep concern that this process of resignification is ineffective and actually only further perpetuates patriarchal archetypes, that despite women's efforts to reclaim their feminine qualities, the very nature of these characteristics are implicitly misogynistic and contributes to an essentializing hegemonic discourse on gender. Not only does it limit the definition of girlhood, womanhood to femininity, thus isolating non-feminine, female-identifying people and problematizing feminine, male-identifying people, but it also inspires neoliberal principles that are extremely unhealthy to maintain. Post-recession or recession girls can no longer afford girl power. The air of female freedom as practiced through overconsumption is suddenly replaced with frugality, control, and socioeconomic failures. And this leads us to an array of other negative or demystifying characteristics associated with girlhood. A lot of my research at the time was heavily based on a book by Jens, and you'll see throughout the slides that there's quotes from the text itself. You'll see the domestic realm conceals a political assault on women's rights. There's objectifying and commoditizing trap that makes women buy into patriarchal stereotypes of female appearance and neoliberal individualist principles. It's very interesting to see that femininity and overindulgence is then like translates into a different domain when we consider capitalism and the way capitalism capitalizes on femininity, and that in that process it largely excludes a portion of women that cannot participate in this neoliberal conception of girlhood. Um, Also, that girlhood this way does really feel to be perpetuating um, patriarchal stereotypes. There's a very interesting user on TikTok, a trans woman called Dylan, who seems to be receiving a lot of backlash, although they also are recognized for being a positive force in the community. But I'll show you this one video here.
Day one of being a girl, and I have already cried 3 times. I wrote a scathing email that I did not send. I ordered dresses online that I couldn't afford. And then when someone asked me how I was, I said, I'm fine, when I wasn't fine. So, how'd I do, ladies? Good? Girl power.
Yeah, so one could quickly see how this might be perpetuating stereotypes, and you'll see in the comment section that is how a lot of girls and women felt. Like, having a laugh using misogynistic stereotypes isn't a way to connect. But then in response, especially given the context of this user, you'll see that people are saying, y'all don't even realize that a lot of people who are new to womanhood want to experience the stereotypes, and that it was as being a trans woman for Dylan, they were robbed the experience of feminine stereotypes. They weren't allowed to participate in them. So it's this interesting territory where femininity entraps some and then frees others, all the while participating in a kind of capitalistic neoliberal framework. But in the video that we saw earlier by Dylan, you'll see that they are playing on concepts of like being overly emotional, being ambivalent, overspending, being indirect, dishonest, or concealed, which are all stereotypes of the woman. Yeah. Amongst all the TikToks, I found an overwhelming sense of loss and despair, and I think this is an emotional repercussion of neoliberalism. One's gender identity is no longer socially and culturally situated, but also economically positioned and influenced by capitalism. Individuality, be it empowered or encroached upon, is nonetheless commodified, marketed, or financially defined. Being a girl or a woman is immediately associated with capitalistic images of being a girl, and likewise your ability to practice the possibilities of your gender personhood is directly influenced by your economic playing field. The intertwining of gender identity and capitalization results in a fragmentation of personhood, and this brings on the feelings of loss of autonomy and loss of autonomy and subjectivity, loss of control, and as the girl transitions into womanhood, she loses her stepping, loses her sense of positionality, only to later realize just how situated she actually is, and that too is devastating to her. It was actually very heartbreaking for me to go through all of the content to see this overwhelming sense of loss, and as the presentation goes on you will see that the emotions get more intense and more negative. You will have video content like this where she says, why are all the girls I know scared of not being teenagers? Why is being 19 so romantic and 20 so nothing? The girlies on my For You page felt the same loss I did when we turned 20, and we all wish we could turn back time. If turning 20 isn't a big part of womanhood, then why do we all wish to be teenage girls forever? I can't remember what the audience was. Fire, but when we're dancing, I'm alright. Kind of angsty. And you'll see in the comments, you say, personally, I felt that as a teenager I was allowed ambition. As I've grown older, I feel more cognizant of the impending expectations of gender roles. We are taught that we lose value when we age, and turning 20 is the first change in digits, so it's scary. The gendering of these concepts oppresses women. Men my age can be in love without foregoing their passions. True women have to pit their personality to the side once they give birth. Teenagers are hypersexualized, and I felt like I was losing the one thing I had going for me to be desirable. So you immediately, very clearly have concepts of loss and the feeling of becoming less. There's rhetoric of being scared, being so nothing, loss, wish we could turn back time, loss of value, loss of desirability, loss of ambition, loss of passions, loss of personality, ultimately loss of subjectivity and self-defining agency. These subdued and sad feelings for some turn into frustration and rage for others. I found these two clips embodied the pain and anger of girlhood really well. Again, they're quite long, so I won't read them all, but I've summarized underneath each what are the key concepts. So you can immediately sense from the audio, the sound, and the visuals that this creator is upset. And in the lexical content, they say things, they mention ideas of rage and pain, mourn, leaving youth, fear, suffocation, despair. They describe their identity as fragmented, disguised, inauthentic, in a role. They talk about the performativity of gender in the following. Immediately eerie, but the content she's describing, she's talking about how girlhood is traumatizing, and the transition from girlhood into woman is uninspiring. You move from like childish candor to shame to separation, and then suddenly you're in competition with other girls. There's accusation, there's defiance, resent. The girl is cunning, smart, witty, there's naivety, she's a fool, there's disillusionment, there's pain, and she feels tired. These are all negative experiences of being a girl. I found that these sentiments were extremely similar to those of the riot girls, a subculture of girl power that was more politically charged, involved in activist movements, and as Siegel put it, inspired by a healthy dose of youthful female rage. The riot girls are more tightly associated with the face of rebellion, pop culture, and practices of feminism that coincide with second wave feminism, leaning into what is now referred to as third wave feminism. From my understanding, third wave feminism is a cross between second wave feminism and post-feminism, in that it allows for the reappropriation of gender traditionalism without directly opposing the need to distance femaleness from femininity. It tries to erase the binaries of the feminine debate and also attempts to recognize issues of intersectionality, which honestly was surprisingly lacking on TikTok. I wish there was more sexual and racial inclusivity and a more open dynamic definition of girlhood, but we can get into that later. You see that the post-boom period is a complex one involving competing discourses of anger, nostalgia, denial, and loss. There's precarity and risk, frugality, carefree spending to economical thrift, a light-hearted pleasure to nervous anguish. So again, I find it very interesting when you can see theoretical concepts or ideas that are being discussed in the academic sphere, then landing in more concrete examples and rhetoric in the digital sphere, which feels less abstract. You have people commenting and saying, I'm 18 and all I fear is anger and resentment. It feels like it's also obvious how are all these people blind to the misogyny that coats everything. I feel like I carry my mother's pain and agony with me everywhere. I feel because she had me, she gave up a part of herself. How do I grow out of resentment? Not a day goes by where I'm not mad at the world. Whenever I read poems on girlhood and womanhood, I think of my mother and her mother and all their mothers before them. It's intergenerational trauma and pain of being a girl. In addition to pain, another major topic or theme prevalent in the TikTok narrative was that of the body, which arguably is a conduit of pain, specifically menstruation. A lot of content was comedy or satire related to the experience of getting your period, and most importantly, this retelling of the experience almost always involved the presence of fellow women, friends, sisters, mothers, etc. Menstruation is a collective communal experience, your blood sisters, and the blood you spill allows you to belong. The evolution of your body is an evolution into your gender. Here in this digital space of girlhood, body and identity are synonymous, and this narrative becomes extremely problematic. Not only does it isolate cis women who do not menstruate, but it also entirely excludes non-uterus bearing people from identifying with or experiencing girlhood and womanhood. The naturalization of gender also creates space for misogynist opinions on young girls and women's potential, such as the Cartesian ideas of male transcendence and female immanence, or the more common spat, girls can't play sports. As it is comedy, this content may seem non-befitting of academic discourse, but I do think it's actually important, and whilst there is foul language in this audio, it might be amusing to indulge in. Anyways, or
Jenny got it. Then stupid Vicky got it. And I tried everything to get my period. Nothing. So, I faked it. Looks like Florida. Yeah, I got it.
And so on and so forth. You see that there's like humor, as in these two videos. There's this collective experience of struggling, pain, discomfort, awkwardness. In the second one, there's this whole narrative of everybody else got it, I didn't get it, so I faked it, which reveals this need to belong, your blood sisters, your ladies' days. But whilst this is all very comedic and you bond through this shared experience of pain and discomfort and literal blood, there is also the flip side where women who do not get their period experience immense dysphoria, missed experiences. They feel less female and have an immense sense of not belonging, like this content creator.
Why would you want a period? Trust me, you don't want one. Well, unfortunately, I can't change the way that I feel and my dysphoria. I wish I could, but I can't. But why would you want something that's painful? I don't want mine. Well, I'm sorry that it's painful. I will never experience it, so I will never be able to sympathize with you on that level, and I'll never have that experience, and that's where my dysphoria comes from. Your experience is yours, and mine is mine. So there's nothing really we can do. I can't change the way that I feel about wanting a period.
So there's this very direct tie of the body and embodiment being a gender affirming experience, which is why I said earlier that it's problematic, because it naturalizes gender. But at the same time, it's extremely difficult to ignore that, to ignore the fact that there's a plethora of people on the internet that when you look at hashtag girlhood, they're talking about their period. So it is an identifying marker, but we've reached a point now where it's like, okay, we can acknowledge that the body is obviously an element of discourse here, but is there a way to give it less rhetorical power, perhaps? I don't know. It's a concept that really problematizes me. The following TikToks capture the trauma that comes with naturalization and the fragmentation that ensues when you introduce physicality to the conceptualization of such an immaterial subject, one's identity. Although I personally disagree with the negative signification of Beauvoir's language, she expresses this fragmentation really well. She says, "I turn the body into a screen between the woman and world, a burning fog that weighs on her, stifling her and separating her. Experienced through the suffering and passive flesh, the entire universe is a burden too heavy to bear." It's extremely interesting to see this echoed in contemporary TikToks. Even if we can criticize the principles behind this kind of feminist theory, we cannot ignore nor invalidate the feelings being expressed by young girls. This content creator wrote, "I was 11 when I got my first period. My mother said, 'Welcome to womanhood,' and then sent me off to middle school. I found it cruel that my childhood began and ended with blood. I wasn't a woman then any more than I'll be a woman on my deathbed. Deep down, I am still that little girl who went to bed with clean underwear and dreams. Deep down, I never left girlhood." And then the other one says, "I will forever loathe the fact that I was thrust into womanhood without any say in the matter. Becoming a girl was much easier than becoming a woman. At least then I was unaware of my existence, of my future place in the world. When I became a woman, I was completely aware of my body starting to tear itself apart, preparing for something that would never come, sentencing another bright-eyed little girl in a long line of bright-eyed little girls to womanhood is not something I could live with myself doing. The line of bright-eyed little girls die with me." So you have rhetoric around cruel, childhood ended and begun with blood, I wasn't a woman, I'm still that little girl, clean underwear and dreams, loathe, forced becoming, girls are unaware of the situatedness, women are aware, torn, fragmented body, sentencing and imprisonment. The audio is very dark and lonely in this sense of it's kind of wallowing. It's not a pleasant place to be. Young girls don't seem to always enjoy this transitioning of girlhood to womanhood because they know what they are falling into. The following comments are from the previous video. So you see, I love this so much. I have a lot of feelings about womanhood and my body, and I feel like this really encapsulates the fear and confusion of it all. Why was it so traumatic? It's something almost all women go through, but it was so traumatic. When I first got my period, I was crying because I was so scared, and my mom kept saying, "You're a woman now." "I'm not a woman, Mom." Oh, I got goosebumps. I mean, blood and body, it is traumatic. It's a wound to some, to many. And if anything, at least it might not, although it is physically experienced as pain, it's more so recognized almost semantically as a wound. You understand that blood and period isn't only a physical experience, but it's being perceived by society as some sort of tear. You are no longer a girl, you are a woman, and that's just, a girl can recognize the symbolism behind it, and they recognize it as something bad, as an imposing an upcoming negative experience for the rest of your life. Despite how bleak the past slides were, everything we've spoken about so far accumulates the final understanding that girlhood and subsequently womanhood forms a community. It is a shared identifying experience. There is a sisterhood. The reason for being is rather bleak. Shared trauma and struggles, shared oppression and obstacles, shared situatedness. We are all collectively perceived by society in a specific way, and these perceptions influence the way we interact with the world and the way it interacts with us. This treatment includes objectification, sexualization, or belittlement. Women have shared experiences between them, be small or large. from bad romances to sexual assault, from outfit malfunctions to workplace misdemeanor, from familial expectations to patriarchal pressures. This unifies girls and women, creating a camaraderie, or rather sisterhood, one that supports you but can just as easily ostracize you. Although complicated, dynamic, and ever redefined, being a girl and being a woman is indeed an identity. We were given a place in society, but we've created a space for ourselves. And you see this again in TikTok content. Returning to Dylan, she posted about her experience of girlhood, and she talks about this.
Day 27 of girlhood, and I'm going to tell you the best and the worst part of being a girl so far. The best part has to be this tangible energy from woman to woman that I didn't know existed, because I never had that feeling when I was a man with other men, or it's even a different feeling than when I was a gay man with women.
But then she goes on to explain that just as easily girls can ostracize you, girls can be mean, and they can like set a line or binary of who belongs in the girl community and who doesn't. Yes, some comments were really sweet. They said, your sisterhood with each other is unlike any other. It's so beautiful. Or sisterhood is for everyone, not restricted to any gender. In this video, someone responds to Dylan's video by talking about the experience of being a girl in a club and being able to like meet other girls in the bathroom, which again seems like a frivolous phenomenon, and why am I discussing this on an academic level? But it reveals and exposes that sense of sisterhood, which is an interesting concept, that there's that unspoken shared experience, or that trickle down of intergenerational trauma, or recognizing your position in society. Explicitly or implicitly, girls, or anyone who identifies as such, feels that historicity of their gender, and through that they connect with other girl identifying people. Yeah. And just to close, I thought it was interesting that this sense of identity and community is notably absent in the male experience, or it seems to be, digitally that is. Being male doesn't seem to be a unifying, identifying marker in the same way that being a woman is. There is no hashtag boyhood on TikTok, except for a reference to a film. But that's probably because they don't need one. They don't need a hashtag. They don't need a digital space to share and redefine what it means to be. But hopefully that will change, because maybe in redefining boyhood will also help redefining girlhood. Anyways, it's a long, complicated conversation. This is just a small intake on what is happening digitally in terms of girlhood. I hope it was interesting for you. I'm sorry it ran quite long. It's difficult to go through all of the digital content. But yeah, as they would say, girl, bye. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.